She didn't want to deal with him before trial because he's a bully. And we've seen it a couple of times here where perhaps he's gone too far. Did he go too far here?
Michael, I think the attorneys have already gone way too far in the case. There's been a lot of allegations, finger pointing, saying that one another, they're unethical. So this is just par for the course in this case. And I thought Lewin did an effective job. There's been great cross-examination in this case. I agree with Eklund. Both Lewin and then the whole defense team, DeGuerin, Chesnov, Lewis, they're all fantastic. We're watching a heavyweight fight here in my hometown of Los Angeles, and they're really putting on a clinic of cross-examination. So if you're a law student, you're a young lawyer, or someone who wants to go to law school or is thinking about it, you should tune into Court TV tomorrow, because that's when we expect Bob Durst to testify and fireworks are going to fly. But really the irony of a memory expert not remembering things, couldn't help but smile at that today.
Well, I mean, on some level, in front of this jury without the defendant taking the stand, the information that this is a guy who doesn't have any criminal background, had no motive in this case, is a guy who's a Navy veteran, a well-known chiropractor, really someone that you just would not think would commit this type of crime. They needed to get that information in front of the jury, which is difficult to do unless the defendant takes the stand. So how would they have done it? And I think Kirk mentioned this was one way to talk about it in opening statements.
Well, the defense did a good job in opening, but they're still way behind. I have to respectfully disagree with Kirk on reasonable doubt here. There's plenty of evidence. Let's just go through it. Less than a week before, there's video surveillance of Chad driving to the business and casing the business. There are fibers that put him in that stolen RJR vehicle. It was his vehicle that fled the McDonald's, and there's witnesses that are going to testify to that effect. But let's talk about the evidence that the search warrant uncovered at his house. And unless you believe this was a frame job or law enforcement planted that evidence, there's 9 empty shell casing. Coincidentally, there were 9 shots fired that killed those 4 victims. There's a bent knife. And guess why there's no DNA evidence? Because it was cleaned with bleach. The exact clothing he was wearing, the orange hooded sweatshirt, the orange mask, again, all at his house. Gun parts that match the weapon. So unless you think Chad Isaak is the unluckiest chiropractor in the world that happens to come across this treasure trove of evidence that links him to a murder, I think the jury is going to see past all this and return a guilty verdict.
Perhaps a form of jury nullification could take place here. Prosecution's case took 37 days, numerous witnesses. We saw the actions of the prosecutor in this case coming off at times, perhaps overzealous is the word I will use. Could the jury decide, or 1 or 2 jurors decide, that this just isn't worth it, that perhaps they feel sorry for Durst and decide not to convict?
Michael, likability matters, both for the prosecutor, John Lewin, in this case. I think he's emotional because he's been living with this case for so many years. It's a cold case. Let's not forget, he famously and personally flew out to New Orleans to interview Bob Durst for 3 hours when he was arrested. That never happens. So I think it does matter. But that's why Lewin is trying to paint Durst as someone that doesn't play by the rules, someone that's a millionaire, but he still shoplifts. He still uses food stamps. Not really relevant to whether he's a murderer or not, but they're trying to dirty him up. And on the defense side, they're doing a great job of showing a frail old man with a catheter who has cancer that the jurors may feel sorry for. So you can see the strategies playing out in this courtroom just a few minutes away from me.
Strapman, put on your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy ride. If he takes the stand, I can tell you, put on your seatbelts, because it's going to be a roller coaster dealing with Lewin and his encyclopedic knowledge of this case. I mean, we have statements to police. We have commentaries on movies. We have things he said to other people. I mean, just voluminous statements made by this particular defendant that's going to be used to cross-examine him and impeach him, any word he says on the stand. I mean, what are your thoughts on him taking the stand? Does Lewin have to be careful, or is he going to go full bore and not worry about what it looks like, the optics of this old man being on the stand trying to deal with him?
I think Lewin will be more careful with Bob Durst because he was a lot nicer when he interviewed him. And we know 100% that he's going to testify, because both in the opening before the pandemic, his defense team said he will. And then in the reopening 14 months later, the defense said the same thing. So they've represented that to the jury. The last thing you want to do is, promise something like that and not deliver. And in all the mistrial motions based on physical incapacity, they've said the reason that a mistrial is appropriate is because our client intends on taking the stand. So there's no question that that's going to happen. It's going to happen as early as tomorrow. And you nailed it. I mean, here's someone which you rarely see. He's given extensive interviews to journalists, to people that are making documentaries, producers, to the district attorney in the case. And it's worked once before, and I'm sure, like Kirk said, Bob Durst thinks he can pull it off again. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I think I understand it's his story that's basically going to put this other guy away. He knows details about the murder, but that doesn't mean he couldn't have done it himself and maybe decided to implicate somebody else in it. He got 25 years. He's going to get out. He didn't get the full murder charge. So he has some incentive to go ahead and tell this kind of lie. How do you deal with putting this guy in front of a jury?
Yeah, jury's not going to like Bo Dukes, but what you do is you give him an opportunity. You don't make any promises. You don't shave any time off until after the case, and that's what you present to the jury. And you put all those bad facts out there. But you got to put them on. But even without Bo Dukes, you got plenty of evidence against Ryan Duke. If you're the prosecutor, let's not forget you have a 4-hour confession that these jurors are going to hear, and we know his defense is going to be that because apparently he's going to tell them that he was asleep at the time. But there is Ryan's DNA at the scene of the crime at Tara's house. There's a latex scrub that has both of their DNA on it. So going to be very tough to defend this case. And frankly, I don't think the prosecution even needs Bo to get a guilty verdict here.
Now, that's a good point.